Hello everyone, my name is Abigail and on behalf of the organisers Oliver Kinross, I'd like to welcome you all to London Build Online. Today's session is a panel discussion on sustainability, a sustainable built environment, moderated by, it's Sustainability, Circular Economy and Construction, moderated by Katherine Adams and joined by our fantastic lineup of panellists. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A throughout the session, so do take the opportunity to submit any questions you have in the questions box on your screen. I hope you all enjoyed today's session and I'd like to hand over to you now, Katherine.
Hi everyone, I'm Katherine Adams. Welcome to the session. So we have about 90 minutes to talk all about circular economy and construction. We would welcome your questions. Please submit as many as you can to the chat function. We have got a few discussion points that we will go through anyway, but we hope to have a lively debate. So I think if we start by all introducing ourselves, I'll start first. So I'm Katherine Adams. I'm a technical and research associate for the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products. I've been working for them for about 2 or 3 years now. We do lots of different things, looking at embodied carbon, reuse. We actually have a reuse summit tomorrow, which is free. We have natural fibre insulation, and personally, I've been working in the area of construction waste and circular economy for about 20 years now, so I'm showing my age a bit. And I've just finished a PhD actually looking at the whole issue. So without further ado, I can see David, so I'll pass it over to David for him to introduce himself.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Dave Cheshire. I'm in the sustainability team in AECOM. So yes, I wrote a book on applying the circular economy to the built environment back in 2016, based on a couple of years worth of research on that. I was delighted that it got included, one of the diagrams in the book got included in the draft London plan, and that's sort of in there still, thankfully. And I'm now working with, or have been working with the GLA, the Greater London Authority, to implement and police the new GLA policies around circular economy, which has been really exciting to do and to see some change going on. Also working with design teams to implement circular economy, and there is a new edition of my book coming out next year when I hit the deadline. So that's it.
Thank you, David. You didn't quite get the Christmas reading list then for the book, no, but okay. One for the new year, everyone. Joaquin, how do you say your name? Apologies for that.
You said it perfectly fine. No, it's Joaquin, actually.
Joaquin.
Yeah, so hi. Thank you, Katherine. My name is Joaquin Monge. I'm an architect associate at BDP. Since 2010, I've been living and working in Madrid, in Shanghai, and in London for the past 5 years. And my work has been mainly focused on transport and mixed-use development, both in Asia and in Europe. So I would say the contribution to the sustainable growth of cities and buildings has always been a big driver at BDP. And in the recent years, the circular construction has actually taken the central stage quite strongly, in a way that is actually sort of redefining how we are behaving as a business. Not only the way we design our buildings, but also the way we behave with and interact with one another in the office. Well, or we used to, at least. I think during this time, we've managed to accomplish quite a few nice objectives. We've been able to deliver and get planning permission to a series of projects where we've tried to capture this positive impact that goes from the first London Underground station with a structure made of timber, the highest office timber in Toronto, a series of container buildings as well in the UK. I'm sure you're familiar with Box Park. We've also been able to deliver some research facilities and office building with outstanding BREEAM certification, and the latest and very sad and unexpected 5 of the Nightingale COVID hospitals during the pandemic. So in all of these projects, we've done our best to try to sort of capture that positive circular construction principles as much as we've been able to do so. So anyway, very happy to be here today, surrounded by these big names of peoples and companies, and looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Joaquin. Lily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Lily Crompton. I'm Senior Sustainability Manager at ISG. I'm working in the engineering division at the moment, and I've been in the industry for over 10 years now, so in construction and sustainability. And in terms of ISG and the circular economy, I'd say, you know, on sites we tend to do things just in our very nature that tick some of the boxes for circular economy, but we don't always, you know, record them or really think about the bigger picture. And so recently we've been, some colleagues of mine have been putting together a circular economy policy for the business. And next year is really going to be the first year where we can really drive circular economy. And we're looking at developing some KPIs in Q1 next year. We're looking at audit processes for the very beginning of projects, if there's going to be any kind of refurb or demolition. We're rolling out e-learning next year. And something that we're looking at the moment as well, are materials passports. So there's a long way to go, but there's some really good stuff coming over the next year for ISG and the circular economy. So yeah, look forward to discussing can't get my words out. Looking forward to discussing it all with you today.
Thank you, Lily. I'm not sure. Do we have Ruth here? I think she was having a few technical issues. No.
Hiya.
So you are there.
No, she's still trying to join, but we'll let you know as soon as she's able to log on.
Okay, great. Okay, well we'll make a start without Ruth, and hopefully she can join us at some point. So just to say, it's a great line up of panelists, so do ask your questions. Panelists are full of people who are actually doing circular economy and know what others are doing as well. So do take advantage of sort of picking our brains, if you like. So we've come up with a few discussion points to start with, and everyone's sort of given a few. So we'll start with them. So the first one was Joaquin, really, is how do we unlock the potential of circular economy in construction? So that's quite a big question, really, to start off with. Do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, actually, as you say, it's a big question, and I'm pretty sure that each of the stakeholders within the supply chain may have a different perspective about the issue and what our priorities should be. I think from a design and an architectural point of view, I think there may be perhaps 3 fields where I would personally just put all my efforts to try to improve. I think the first one would be to try to tackle the shocking lack of data that we currently have. Lack of data that affects to the product performance, real product performance, the embodied carbon, but even data about the existing urban fabric, the existing building fabric. So if we have any hope or aspiration in the future to try to be able to reuse some of that material, we need to start sort of acknowledging what it is that we have. And I know there are companies that are running out now surveys on existing buildings, but I think we're not conscious of how relevant that is. And the moment we do have, or the designers, we have that sort of information accessible to us, I think that's going to mean a step change in all the industry. So that would be the first one, the lack of data. Second one would be probably the lack of awareness within the industry, and this affects, I think, everyone. And I put myself in the line up until a few years ago, and a clear representation of this is, that cradle to cradle, the concept and the idea has been there for a while now. There's been there for years, and it was not until last year that the London plan, as David mentioned before, included some sort of policy or guidance on circular economy. So I understand that it's an unexplored territory, but we need some sort of we need to raise that awareness within the industry. And the third one that I would say that I've been able to appreciate is the lack of perhaps common standards and reliable measuring tools. And a clear example of this is, us as an architectural practice, we do have series of strategies and tools to sort of assess the circularity of our designs, quantitative and qualitative. But from my understanding, each company does it differently. So having different tools takes you to different results, and that means that we're not all pushing towards the same direction. So I would say those 3 for me are the priority: the data, the awareness in the industry, and the common standards, I would say.
Thank you, Joaquin. I'm sure I will definitely pick up on those later, particularly data, because I think we've got a few questions on that. David, would you like to sort of address any of those points, or make ones of your own from I guess more of the client or consultant point of view?
Yeah, I thought that the data point was a really good one, and I think I found some research they're doing. For example, they're doing some work up in University of Bradford where they've been mapping the all the bricks in Bradford, and which is, I think, is brilliant. So they actually mapped out where they think and what type of bricks they are, and done a digital map of that. And I think that's the sort of thing that we're going to have to start having to hand, so that when someone says we're going to knock down this building, there's a flag that goes up and says, hang on, there's a whole load of valuable resources in this building that someone else might want. So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And Lily, on the data point, you mentioned material passports, didn't you? Which would obviously speak to a lot of that, knowing what's in your building and what you can do with it.
Yeah, exactly. It ties in really nicely. Yeah, if we can fully understand, you know, I think a lot of our understanding of materials to date has been about where it's come from, because we want to understand embodied carbon and our supply chain. But now we need to start looking at, well, what happens next? And if we can have that all in one place, all of that information, that would be really, really useful for the industry. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think the challenges of that is having it available a lot sort of all the time, really. So not just when you're going to do demolition, or not when you're just about to do refurbishment, because it's often too late then. You need time, don't you, to sort out supply chains for reuse of materials and reclamation. So it's very much having that data from the beginning, or even if it's in existing buildings, trying to provide it sort of retrospectively, really. So do we have the right data tools and techniques? What else do we need? Who needs to do what, do you think, to get that moving? Who wants to go first there?
I think there is a danger that we get swamped in data and don't get any information. They're two different things, aren't they? So I think we do need to be careful. And I think it's interesting because the materials passport idea, as I understand it, originated from Thomas Rau, architects in Amsterdam, and he's developed his Madastar database. But actually, interestingly, talking to some other folk over in Amsterdam, they're saying that actually when they've sort of been practically using some of this stuff, is actually they've moved away from trying to capture every single tiny thing in the building and actually try to get it more to an element level, and saying, look, let's find out what's in this, let's look at the element. And because the other thing that come alongside this is this idea that you tag everything with some sort of QR code or something like that, and actually, but when you think about that practically, you think, well, what are you going to do for a facade? Are you going to tag the glass, the sealant, the frame, or everything, or are you just going to tag the facade element and just say, well, that's tagged and this is what's in it? And I think that's probably the latter is probably the case. And I think we do need to be a little bit careful that we don't just collect huge volumes of data that don't actually tell us anything. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but I think that's one issue. I think
I agree with you, David. I think we're all very good at collecting data sometimes, especially on construction waste and construction site impacts, and Lily will probably agree with this, but we don't often actually use that to do better with, and use that as knowledge to drive our performance. So I think we could do better there. Lily, could you say a bit about how ISG are looking at sort of recording what they're going to do in circularity in terms of collecting information and what you intend to do with it?
Well, it is early stages at the moment. Like I said, we've just developed a policy, so that's being signed off shortly by the C-suite at ISG Group. But yeah, I mean, next year we're going to be looking at KPIs. I mean, we're really early stages, so it's really difficult to really go into that detail at the moment. But some of the items we want to look at are, and Joaquin mentioned it actually, it's about kind of understanding the buildings that, if we're going to be going into existing buildings and it's not a new build, for example, understanding what's already there. If we can understand what's already there when it's going to be a refurb or whether we've got to demolish something, then it means that you know, you can start the project off from a circularity perspective from day one. You know, you can build that into your design. So at concept design stage, if you understand what is already there, then that's going to change everything. So that's something we really want to work on, because obviously we have a huge fit out business within ISG. So that's something we could really hopefully run with in our fit out division. And also we mentioned about there's a lack of understanding of what circularity means and what the circular economy means, particularly in construction. It's not as simple as, you know, essentially recycling waste and finding a new, you know, new product for it. So we need to roll out some learning across all different parts of the business, because it is a whole mindset change, really, isn't it? So yeah, we are really early stages really at the moment, so I can't really talk about KPIs, but I think our focuses are to try and push our designers and our design teams where we're engaged really early to understand what's gone before and what is in place already. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's good that you started your journey. We'll have to have another chat a year later to see how it's going and what you know, what data you do have and how it's all progressed. So, Joaquin, picking up on the sort of design point of view that Lily mentioned, is there enough happening there? What needs to happen more, especially, and we can sort of move into sort of the refurb versus demolish argument as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there are, you know, we're moving towards the same direction, but there are projects or opportunities where you can actually put in practice more aspects of the circular economy than you can put some others in a different way. It never happens as the theory says. So we're doing our best to explore each of the fields in the better way. But I think from our side, or at least the message that we try to get through the company, there may be, again, three things that we try to or improve or maybe be cautious of, and I think this is actually based on part of the work that David did on his book. One of the things is the selection of materials. I think we need to change a bit maybe the priorities that we use to select the materials. We need to start looking a bit more carefully to the lifespan, of course, to the embodied carbon, but even as well to the weight, something as simple as the weight. You know, I was reading the other day, I think 60 or 70% of the embodied carbon of a building comes from the structure. You get an easy hit. Okay, let's just try making them lighter. Let's see if we can just reduce that embodied carbon as well. So I think we need to change completely, you know, the way we select the materials, and also from you know, we have the materials, but then we need to start thinking how we put this together, how we construct the building. And assembly and disassembly is going to be a challenge by itself, an interesting one that we're going to be facing in new buildings. But we need to start thinking what Lily was mentioning. How are we, or David as well, how are we going to be able to get something from an existing building that was built not to be used in the future and be able to reuse it in another building? I think that's the biggest challenge for us. If we're able to unlock that feature, we're just going to see a whole new reality for designers. And I think the third one would be, so we talk about the materials, how we put them together, and as designers we have the responsibility, I think, to perhaps design for flexibility and adaptability. And I mean, me personally, from my experience, I've never designed a building thinking for a use in 70 years ever, and that just sort of explains very well the simplicity and the short term of our thinking. We need to start thinking on, you know, what if an office building will become a residential, or a residential an office, or I was reading the other day, a shopping center could become a health center, especially these days where we have these sort of challenges. So I think we need to open our minds a bit more as designers and try to be a bit more flexible and adaptable.
Okay, and just following on from that, are you seeing, you mentioned material selection, assembly, disassembly, and then the sort of adaptability and flexibility, those three. What are you seeing coming from clients from those three? Is there one that's more stronger than others? Are they all being just looked at a little bit? What are you seeing?
Because normally, I mean, this is again my experience, there might be clients that are very well informed and they know what they want, but normally it's for us to decide. They just come with a clear vision of what they want, whether it's the most sustainable commercial development or an office building, and it's depending to us and the context and the requirements on the brief that we need to decide which is the best solution. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's one specifically. Normally, if this requirement is that they want to have flexibility in the future. So I'm working on a project in Russia, and I've done one in Basingstoke recently, where we've been asked to deliver buildings that should host perhaps further uses, or start thinking on the possibility of transforming some of the use into residential in the near future. Up until today, or up until the last 10 years, we haven't been asked that sort of brief, and that's maybe them just sort of going ahead of what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, okay. And then David, obviously that's sort of something you need to look at within the circular economy statement, isn't it, for the London plan? Are you I don't know if you're able to share any of any findings from the statements that have come already, but are you finding where are you finding the sort of focus from those plans, and are they pushing the boundaries, do you think, or are they just sort of doing a little bit more?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think what's amazing is that we have a circular economy policy in the London plan. I mean, that's just, I would never, when I was writing my book, I'd have never have dreamed that was going to happen within a year. In 2017 that came out. So I think that's pretty amazing in itself. And the fact that we've got some pretty rigorous looking guidance now that's it's still in draft consultation. By the way, the consultation events are happening right now. I think there's another one this week if you're interested in getting involved. And the guidance includes some metrics in there, like a few panelists were mentioning about the weight of the building, about the amount of being at the end of the chain about what's being diverted, but also trying to drive people to think about recycled content and things. I mean, it's really hard to get measurable targets on this stuff, and there's still lots of qualitative things. But what we're hoping is that we can gradually, starting from, we've got already 25 statements have come in even in the last few months that we've been reviewing, which is, I think, is brilliant, even before the policies, formally adopted and everything. And we're already being able to start collecting data. And once we get that sort of information through, both at the planning stage, but also we're going to then get it at post completion. So when they've actually built the building, how heavy was the building in reality versus what they thought it was going to be. So I think that's the first step, is to really get people on side, and definitely everyone is that we've seen so far. And then I think the next step then is just to start to tighten the screw effectively and start to say, okay, now we've seen this, we like what you're doing, can we get some more of this? So I think the first ones have got, there's a few little nuggets of interesting ideas in there around, for example, I've seen there's one project they were looking at where they were actually talking about putting what they were calling a soft a core into the building that was like a demountable core, so that you had although they were still using concrete around the outside, they were looking at demounting or making that out of either bolted steel or glulam, so that you could actually change the interior, and then you could either say, okay, we want to extend the floor plates over more into the atrium, or we want to open out the center, or we want to put stairwells and things up there. And I thought that was quite an interesting idea to deal with both the long-term adaptability and the longevity of the building versus actually trying to keep it around for as long as we could. So yeah, so definitely some ideas coming out, but yeah, there's a lot more to do. And I think, as we'll discuss, there's lots of questions and issues around where is the supply chain to help us actually implement stuff. There's not very many examples yet of genuinely circular products and services that we can actually draw on that are alive.
Thanks, Dave. So just a reminder to the audience, I haven't seen any questions yet, so we'd love your questions. So please do put them in the chat box, because otherwise I may run out of questions myself at some point. So yeah, it is really great what GLA are doing on the London plan. Obviously, there's going to be lots of learning there. And I just hope other authorities can take that learning and then do it for themselves, really, and sort of start to also get, you know, some of the the big buildings, you know, they can spend a bit more time and energy and be a bit more catwalk on them. It would be good. It would be good to get that down to sort of the more, you know, more not normal, but the more, if you know what I mean, the more smaller type buildings where it is all a little bit probably where there needs to be the more awareness piece as well. So I wanted to pick up on a question Dave raised, which sort of as a discussion point, which is the sort of refurbishment versus demolition, really, and do we think refurbishment will become the preferable choice for buildings? So Dave, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to hope it will. I think, and the GLA policy and guidance is certainly pushing in that direction as an example, but not just the GLA. I think actually there's other drivers. I mean, as was mentioned earlier, you know, you've got embodied carbon of the substructure, and the structure alone will make over 50%, and that similarly relates to the sort of resource use at that stage. So there's a climate crisis type argument as well, which fits in with a lot of people going to net zero and things. And I think that whole net zero agenda that's coming out, or is out, sorry, is rightly picking up on embodied carbon as a massive impact. And actually looking at it, it's actually, you know, it's a higher impact now than the operational emissions, particularly if you have an all-electric building that is actually, the grid is decarbonising over time. So actually your emissions from your buildings, our buildings, will be going down over time and almost flatlining. And I think the other one is the Architects Journal has a retrofit first campaign, which I think is really clever, because it's actually driving for policy change and at the government level. And I think one of the problems that is often quoted is that the tax regime for new build versus refurb is that it drives you away from refurb and towards new build, because you've got 20% tax on refurb. And I think that's something that it would be fantastic if the government could address. So I think, yeah, there's a lot to do. I think I can still see why refurb isn't done. I mean, we look at when I'm doing some of the reviews of projects and they say the buildings are low quality, and you think, really? Let's look them up. And you look them up on Google Maps and you go, whoa. Yes, I can see why you can't keep those. You know, it's like it's a really tatty old sort of sort of
not
industrial
everything.
warehouse kind of single story thing with asbestos roof. And you think, okay, I can see why we don't want to refurbish that.
We don't always want to keep everything, do we? No.
But what I'm hoping will happen is that we'll get sort of pressure from the planning process back up through the decision process, back to that very first decision about, do we want to procure this site, or do we want to have this one, or what are we going to do with it? And I'm hoping that will then drive the decision towards, actually, let's go for this one because there's a really good building on this site that is ripe for refurb. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to say, I think you're right, David. I mean, there's almost like we could almost split it into different sort of characters. The person, the customer, the one that is going to pay from his pocket to do the refurbishment of his house, which is a massive economy as well. And we also have the massive developer, which will look for some sort of incentivization. So I think refurbishment seems to be the way forward, no matter what. You know, when you think, and I can think of very good examples where they've actually applied this, but having a refurbishment over an existing building, well, it gives you the existing infrastructure, it gives you the existing destination. There's so many benefits on it. If in addition to that, we're looking at sort of tax deductions or tax incentivations, that'll be phenomenal. But I read the other day, I think the Green Finance Institute is looking at business models for this particular customer, the customers that I'm talking to you about, the particular, where you're going to be able, or you should be able to sort of pay for the refurbishment as long as you comply with the standards of energy efficient and certain material standards. And they will somehow be able to deduct, or they will lend you the money, but then deduct that part of the money from your council tax. So that way, if I do that refurbishment in my house and I sell the house in 5 years to somebody, that person, because that person is buying a house that has already been uplifted and refurbished, is also going to help contribute in paying that higher council tax. So I think there's some very creative things going on. It's just that we need to actually make it happen in a way, isn't it? Sorry, Katherine, you're on mute, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, I don't know what happened there. We have got a flurry of questions now, actually. So one that's sort of linked to what we're talking through, which is from Mike Peltler, is could planning policy be changed to favour refurb over demolition, and what impact might this be? So Lily, do you want to have a go at that question? You obviously do a lot of refurb as well, so that would
yeah, we do a bit of but I think actually David touched on this just a minute ago, and I think David probably understands existing policies better than I do. But sure. Yeah, I think there does need to be an incentive. I think we are seeing less and less demolition now. There are always going to be cases where demolition might be required because, you know, old building stock may not be as energy efficient as we may like, and retrofitting just won't give us the results that we want. And also, you know, with all of the technology now that we require for a lot of our buildings, those services tend to go in floors or ceilings, and so you just don't have the, you know, the height, the room height or ceiling height for those kind of applications and those kind of services. So yeah, I think there does need to be some kind of incentivization, and it sounds like David touched on potential policy changes or things that are kind of in discussion now, which are really interesting, and I really hope yeah, progress.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in terms of the London plan, I mean, it's in there now as part of the circular economy guidance. You know, there's a flow chart that says, first of all, is there an existing building on the site, and you're supposed to go through that process and demonstrate. The idea was in the same way as if any of us familiar with the London energy hierarchy, that you're supposed to go through a process of, you know, reducing demand, energy efficiency, and all the way through to renewables, and you have to demonstrate you've done something at each step. So I think that's definitely something that's starting to come in. As I say, I think, as I was saying before, I think the problem is the decision's already usually been made by the time the planning application's gone in. There's usually unlikely to be a U-turn on the process halfway through at that stage. You know, that decision would be made on procurement of the site or even, you know, at that point really. And I think that's, as I say, what I'm hoping is there's some backward pressure that pushes it back up through the chain. And the other thing that's worth noting is that although I haven't read this in detail, I know that the new proposals for the permitted development stuff is pushing in the other direction, unfortunately, that the government's pushing out now around allowing people to change cost use classes and without requiring planning permission, which potentially, I guess, could mean that buildings are demolished without even going through a planning process. So that we're going to have to find some teeth somewhere else on that one, and some policy levers to pull.
Yeah, on that one, Dave.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Joaquin.
No, I was going to say on that one, David. I mean, your first-hand perspective is actually quite valuable. Do you think, is your view that the policy is being aspirational enough? What's your view? I mean, when you see, you know, the sort of strategies they're starting to implement for the automobile, I think, well, I don't know if it has been officially approved, but I read on the news, you know, that Boris Johnson is looking at banning the selling cars, petrol or diesel cars from 2030. Do you think that both Lily and David, that sort of approach into our field, is it what we need? Do we need that strong hand to make things happen? Because I think this year is a great example of, you know, we've had to produce X number of masks in 3 months, and we've been able to do it. And nobody would have imagined in March that the world would have changed so much in 3 months or 4 months. Is it just a matter of getting the message of the climate emergency through much stronger? What's your view on this?
Oh no, I completely agree with all of that. But I think you know it's going to be difficult to you know, strong arming stuff is not usually the approach we take in this country, and I think that's probably fair. I think there's going to be, I think it's a combination of lots of things, as I was saying earlier. I think if for example, the other thing in the London plan, sorry, I know I keep going about London, but I think that's where lots happening at the moment, is the whole life carbon assessment. I think that's going to be a strong driver, because that's numerical, and because the targets that they've set are hidden away in the appendix, by the way, but in the appendix of that whole life carbon consultation document, there are some actual targets, aspirational and even just sort of standard practice they want people to hit. And actually looking at those, there's no way that you're going to get anywhere close to those aspirational numbers with a new build, unless you're doing something that is, I don't know, a two-story timber construction. You're never going to get that with a, you know, with a typical large London development with a couple of layers of basement, loads of concrete and steel and you know, and 10, 15 stories. That's you're just not going to hit it. So actually, if as again on the same way, if those start to come in more strongly and we start to turn the GLA starts to turn the screw on those, then I think that there will be that will drive change inevitably.
So we have a question here which kind of links to what we've been discussing, is how will the government encourage a move to using construction products with lower embodied and operational carbon? And you can bring the whole circularity sort of argument into there as well. So I've been looking with a different hat on. I've been looking across Europe, looking at all the different policies that are taking in place in the member states for circularity. Some countries, some of the Scandinavian ones and the Netherlands, are doing great stuff, particularly in whole life carbon, doing national databases, requiring it to be measured, looking at putting targets which you know will require certain levels of performance as well, and then sort of embracing circularity within that. Are we lagging behind in the UK, or I should probably say England? And you know, what is our message for government here, if we have any policymakers listening? Who wants to start with that one? Shall I go to Lily?
Thank you. Oh, I don't know. I think we can't really make any major changes without our government stepping in, and I don't know whether that's me being skeptical. I think in terms of how we compare with the rest of Europe, you know, I've worked in the Netherlands and Germany quite recently, and I don't know, I think we're all on a similar journey at the moment. I think the next 5 years will really start to demonstrate where our differences are and how successful we're being. I think this next year in particular for the UK is going to be really interesting, because loads of businesses, big businesses, different industries are all looking at the moment about how they're going to achieve net zero carbon by 2050. And so many are setting some very ambitious targets of 2030. So that means that, you know, we're going to start seeing some big changes in terms of company policies and business behaviours literally next year. So I think until we start going on this journey over the next year or so, we're not going to be able to compare ourselves easily with other European countries. But from what I've seen, with my limited knowledge of German and the Netherlands environmental law at the moment, I don't think we're far behind. I think we're all kind of on an equal footing at the moment, and it's what we do over the next year or two that's really going to set us apart. But I would say, just to finish off here, I would say that we are reliant on the government on putting things into place to actually get things moving quickly. You know, things are ticking along. You know, the construction industry is improving, but you know, to see the big changes like we've seen earlier this year with our response to COVID and being able to get ventilation machines built and masks out to everyone and tests out to everyone, you know, even though it's not been perfect, the response has been brilliant and it's been fast. And I just don't think we're going to get enough buy-in from business in terms of the climate emergency without the government stepping in and demonstrating that this is actually what they want. And I've personally been really impressed with the fact that the government have actually put some serious hardline dates in place, not only for carbon, although I think that's a bit too far away, but for the car industry. I'm really impressed that that's happened, and now it would be really nice to see other industries have some hard dates to stick to now. So
yeah. So your key message is we need to speed it up, and we need government for that, really.
Yeah,
David,
definitely.
do you want to come in at all there? What would your one ask of government be?
I'm not sure I would ask government for anything. I think well, I mean, generally regulation kicks in after the things have changed, and it just mops up the sort of gas guzzlers or the laggers, doesn't it? If you look at building regs, for example, there was a sort of gradual change in industry, and building regs was just there to sort of I was going to say concrete it in, but just to solidify that and make sure that we didn't have. And I think regulation's really hard to set as aspiration. I think you have to set it as a sort of minimum, whereas planning policy can be, and I think that's why it's so exciting, is that planning policy is more able to be something that you can start with an aspiration and then gradually lock it in that way. So I think it's definitely the way to go, and I think it's been really interesting to see the reaction from the commercial world to the whole climate emergency, the raised awareness of the climate emergency. And it's probably come from a position of partly of fear that they want to be seen to be doing the right thing, or we all want to be seen to be doing the right thing. But I think there has been a massive change over the last 2 years nearly now, or year and a half. And I think I mean, you look at something like Landsec, they just implemented their first net zero their first net zero office building, but it's also it's doing a lot of very clever things with the structure, and it's super lightweight. It's a sort of a novel use of steel with the minimum use of concrete, and it's really clever what they're doing. So I think that we're starting to see that happening, and I think that the combination of policy and changes in the commercial sector will drive the supply chain to respond. And there are already some niches there that I think new businesses could be set up around. I think particularly from that urban mining perspective. I mean, a couple of examples, Paint 360, remanufacturing paint. It's a social enterprise, so they're bringing people into employment that wouldn't be employed normally or typically, and they're taking waste paint and remanufacturing into new paint and putting it back on the market. I mean, fantastic. Otherwise, it goes to be incinerated. Crazy, we're wasting all this paint. And the one I talk about a lot is RMF, raised access flooring. They will remanufacture, the raised access flooring panels. They're 600 by 600. They're a standard product. They're bulletproof. They're super strong things that we're currently typically chucking away. Probably landfilling them because they're really hard to recycle, because they're a mixed steel and timber composite. And these guys have said, hey, there's an opportunity here. So they're grabbing them off construction, off demolition sites, and saying, yeah, we'll take them away for you, clean them all up, and sell them back cheaper into the market, re-warranty them and everything. And you think, well, we just need more of that. That's what we need.
Yeah, much more innovation. But as you say, the time is right for that. Just going back to a comment more on the sort of the client push and the net zero carbon. We've got a question here about, should clients be tendering on carbon budgets as well as cost and program, and are any clients actually close to that? So I'll go to Joaquin first for that one. What do you think on that? Have you been asked?
Well, so it's actually quite linked with what we were discussing about before. I mean, and just to link on what we were mentioning, I do think that the government needs to create a framework where things can happen, in a way, and where companies and business can grow and can provide a wider offer. And this linking with that question that you're talking about. So we've had a few clients that they demand quite a high and effective design solution, but that normally, if we actually want to deliver it, normally entails a higher budget as well. So there are clients that they're going to use the fact that their building are going to have an outstanding BREEAM certification as part of their own marketing, because that's what they're meant to be delivered. But there are some others that is actually quite difficult to sell. So the challenge that we're facing us as a business now is how to integrate this service within the previous service that we were delivering earlier. So we're starting to integrate sort of practices and strategies within our design process to try to sort of embed and absorb the cost, the additional cost that it will entail. But it's absolutely necessary that the client from their side are conscious as well and take this in consideration when looking at their aspirations for a project.
Okay, does anyone else want to come in there? Okay, we've got I'm trying to, there's lots of questions now which I'm trying to to go through. I think we had a question on risk, really, which is obviously linked to the whole client question. In terms of, you know, in construction we are very, very sort of risk adverse, whether we like it or not. That is our model at the moment, or the main model at the moment. How can we sort of embrace circularity within that whole risk model and make that risk model work for circularity? Lily, do you want to start there?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons, or quite a major reason, why construction companies feel quite risk averse when it comes to behaving in a more circular way is around the warranty of materials. So, for example, you know, you might be again, this is refurb. You might be refurbing a building where, you know, the services are actually, you know, in all good working order, but obviously the internal design of the build is going to change. But if you want to reuse some of these services, such as the lighting, then you've got to go down the road of providing or trying to obtain a new warranty for these light fittings that may be reinstalled. And I think as an industry, we don't like going against the grain, and I think that's something that's a bit unusual. And I mean, I'm pleased to say actually we've got a project where we have done that, and we've managed to extend the warranty or honour the existing warranty on some reinstalled lighting in one of our projects, which is great. But I think we need to start asking manufacturers, you know, what's possible. You know, if we're going to take your product and reinstall it elsewhere and it's only 3 years old, are you happy to provide further warranty once you've done whatever checks maybe you need to do? And so I think, you know, as more of us start to have these conversations with manufacturers, for example, it will become more normal and easier to implement, and hopefully we'll feel less risky in doing so. And I think there's potentially issues around insurance, building insurance because of warranties, and that's all tied in together. So I think it's just at the moment about asking the right questions, because actually I think there are quite a few possibilities for us that we're not investigating because it might seem like it's hard work or that we might come up against barriers, but actually, you know, some of the conversations ISG have been quite positive, and manufacturers actually, you know, quite interested in looking at these things too, because it's something then they can sell on to another of their clients. So yeah, I would say probably that's the biggest thing at the moment. And another thing in terms of why construction may be more risk averse to the circular way of doing things is the logistics of, you know, employing circularity on some of our projects, because it may mean storing materials for a period of time, transporting them to other locations, removing something, sending it to a manufacturer, sending it back to a new job. So, you know, it does become a logistical challenge that you wouldn't normally have if you're just ordering materials off a shelf. So that's something that, you know, has to be considered. And so, you know, there are businesses out there that can support, you know, the industry with that, and that's something that we're looking into doing. But yeah, I think because it's new, it's just you know, we're naturally concerned that it might not all go to plan. But I think what I would say is, as long as you're asking the questions of your manufacturers and insurance companies nice and early, then there's no reason why it needs to be risky business.
Yeah, and I think you've hit up on a key point there, is actually having that dialogue with the people that supply our products, because if they've never been asked, they'll never probably think about it, will they? So yeah. David, did you want to come in on the risk or the logistics issue?
Oh, I think Lily covered that really well. I think that's an excellent answer. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think there's in terms of risk, it's what I was saying earlier about, you know, that RMF will re-warranty their product. So you're getting it from a reputable manufacturer, and you're getting a new warranty for an existing product. So I think we somehow, but so through that process, we need to make anything we've got that is a reclaimed product or is a circular product to be on an equal or better than the new, and we've got to be able to do that. So we've got to have all the things in place, all the certifications and things in place to do that, and hopefully they might even be cheaper. So, you know, it might be actually a cost saving, which would make it even better. I think in terms of logistics, I think it's only a problem we have at the moment. It's only a problem now, I think, because we've only got so few projects where we're actually saying, can we reclaim some bits out of this, and is there another project up the road we can give them to, or can we use them again on site? But the sort of vision of the urban mining vision is that actually what you would have is you'd have a flow and a stock of resources in your city that would just keep going, and actually that if you've got everyone participating in that, then actually plus the digital thing, you could see how you would be saying, well, actually, yeah, this building is going down tomorrow, and actually we need some stuff on Tuesday, so we don't need to store it, we just need to, you know, just actually transfer it from one site to the next, because you've got that flow working, and that would be the ultimate vision. And I think and for that, and as part of that, I think having I think the other big thing for me is having brokers. I don't think we've got enough brokers at the moment, and I think, you know, if we turn the demolition industry into brokers, more like salvage yards, more like people who would, or like RMF and Paint 360, who actually take, you know, excess from one place and actually turn it into a new product for somewhere else, then again that storage issue goes away, because actually they're becoming the manufacturer that takes it from one place to another. Of course, and if you're a manufacturer that's supplying someone, then of course you store stuff, because you've got to have stuff ready. You know, you can't sit there with 3 raised floor tiles and say, oh, you wanted 100,000, well, I've got 3. You know, you're going to have them ready. You know, you're going to have them on your warehouse somewhere and deliver them on site the following day. So I think that's the kind of where we need to get to, and it was just trying to figure out how to get there.
And that comes back to the data piece, which we discussed at the beginning, wasn't it? Knowing what we've got and when it will be available and when people need it. I also think as well, you know, in terms of a lot of the brokers, there's some great examples of reuse organisations which are very much in the social value sphere, aren't they? So they're either giving back to charities or they're training up disadvantaged people, and I think that's a key thing which we probably sometimes miss with the argument with circular economy, sort of the link with social value as well. So we've got a question here. As a supplier of shading products such as roller blinds, what type of information, data should we be getting together to help? So I think we've probably answered that in some way, in terms of can you as a supplier, you know, when you walk, I suspect there's lots of blinds that just get pulled down during refurb and fit out. So can they be reused, basically? And if not, what is the best way to remanufacture them or repurpose them?
No, I agree. I think that's part of it, and I think for new products is also getting all the relevant labels, because I think even though you know, the circular economy is slightly different from all the other sort of labels and systems out there, I think there are you know, there are filters that people are still using. So the likes of BREEAM and LEED are still, you know, really important for clients to establish. So if you can demonstrate you're getting some points in the materials section of that, in terms of not having any nasty chemicals in there. I mean, I'd recommend something like, you know, cradle to cradle, or what's the other one? Nature Plus, is it? Yeah, the other certification anyway that would I think align with circular economy principles, but also actually help to differentiate a product. Because what people don't want to have to do is spend a lot of time researching in detail about what's all the ingredients in my material and all this other stuff. EPD is the other one, I suppose. Environmental Product Declaration is really useful to be able to see what the ingredients are in the product, what the next life intent for the next life, and that sort of stuff. It's a formal process. So I think any sort of third-party verification like that is really useful, I think, for a designer or a specifier trying to select stuff.
And so, Joaquin, from a designer point of view, you obviously have to make that choice on what products you specify. Is there enough information? How could that all be approved just to make your life a bit easier?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I was just going to add that I think in response to the question is what we need is for them to understand their product perfectly, and I know they do, but you know, if he was talking about a shading device, well, a shading device, depending on where it's going to be positioned, is going to be affected by certain weather conditions, and we may want to consider placing it in one place for a certain time and then moving it to the other. So we tend to sit down with suppliers and ask them many questions to be able to provide a customized solutions, but also that it allows us for some flexibility in the future. And just on top of the conversation, I mean, the points that you were mentioning earlier when we're talking about the risks, I think there's something that I mean, from a customer perspective, from a supplier perspective as well, you know, treating the building elements as a service, of course, will somehow remove the obsolescence and increase the transparency and the responsibility of suppliers, which I think is something that we need to happen really soon. But it's also, I mean, the fact that you're extending the warranty, or you're providing a product that is going to have your name as a backup, and you're going to be able to deliver whatever update or solution to improve the existing, that creates a massive or a strong link in between the client and the supplier. And that's, I cannot picture how much money the suppliers will be able to save on marketing if you're able to consolidate that relationship in a way. So in just in response to the shading, the person that asked about the shading device, it's all about understanding their product and being able to communicate with us clearly, I mean, as designers, because normally, you know, as I think David and Lily were mentioning, is or my experience particularly when I've looked at certain products where there is I don't know, paving or some other facade elements that I want them to be as circular as possible, as sustainable as possible, the offer is very, very limited. And I guess it's just because there are new businesses and they need a bit of oxygen and time and policy to help out to grow. But at the moment, we are quite tight in what we can actually choose for our buildings. So the more information they can provide us, even if it's just something new or unique, the better, I guess.
Great. So I hope all the manufacturers and suppliers of materials that are on the webinar have listened to that. Please do supply information. It is wanted. It is used. So I wanted to move back. We've mentioned awareness a few times and the lack of awareness. So we have a question here who's someone who represents a training provider. So where do you feel the knowledge industry can positively contribute to the scale of change required? So that could be, for instance, through adult skills training, colleges. What do we really need to do to raise awareness? And I know there's just not going to be one thing, but who would like to go for that first? David?
Well, everywhere, I guess. I mean, I think I think the construction industry, well, from the client side, I think there's gradually increasing awareness in certainly in London. I can't speak for other parts of the country, but I think that would be again driven by, hopefully by things like policy would help to drive that. And then professionals, again, it's coming in slowly, but there's an awful long way to go. And I think, you know, key actors such as structural engineers are realizing their impact now, and I think that's starting to get in there. And there's things like architects declare, structural engineers declare, and everyone else declare, which is people are signing up to, which is brilliant. But then I think, like I was saying earlier, that the opportunities to can we train up people to start to take on that broker role, and get people to start thinking about deconstruction rather than demolition. And there's some guys I've interviewed in the States recently for my book that were talking about they deconstruct buildings. And they're not buildings that were designed for deconstruction. But what they do is very cleverly is they actually tailor. They take chunks out of the buildings to tailored sizes that they've already got an order for somewhere else. So someone wants to build a new shed in their garden, they basically take a chunk out of the side of the building of the right size and then redeploy that directly, rather than trying to take all the bits apart because they're all glued together. And then you get a really high spec building that, instead of a sort of wobbly shed, you end up with a potentially a steel clad insulated building that they've constructed. And I thought that was just a really clever idea to actually think, sort of turn the whole thing around and saying, oh, I'm going to try and peel off every single layer of this. We're actually going to build something new from the bits. And I think that's probably the sort of idea. That's the sort of change in mindset that we need to train people on.
Yeah.
I was going to say. Sorry.
You go.
I was going to say, sorry, I think it might actually sound a bit like simple, but what I've recognized that actually works very well is the fact that people appreciate the change within their local impact, if that makes sense. So, I mean, we are, each of us, we're in from a different industry, but it's not until, you may be working on circular construction, but then you get a plastic cup and you throw it to the bin and you don't worry about anything else. So it's just when you, and I was listening to a panel discussion a few weeks ago, it's just once you get it and you make that change of mindset, that all these principles start apply to all of your actions during the day. So I've seen in my office when there's an architect that is looking at a facade, something as simple as just when defining the layout of the panels, instead of doing it of a size of 1, you do it on a size of 2, and that's actually standard. You are actually saving lots of material, lots of production, lots of time, and that's just a simple decision that, because of the way we have the industry structured these days, might not be reviewed by somebody on a higher hierarchy. So it's just something that could slip over and that could be easily improved. So I think it's all about maybe just changing within our local impact. I think that's the biggest thing. So just be able, how much you can change your close proximity, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the narrative is very important there, isn't it? People listen to stories and own sort of personal experience. Lily, obviously contractors do a lot of training. What happens to have more on circularity or have much more awareness, and especially for the smaller contractors and down the tiers, where they haven't got so much time to spend on this, or
Yeah, I think firstly, we really in construction need to partner with colleges and education institutions, because these are the new people that are going to be coming into the industry. If we make it part of their general education, that we look at the circular economy principles as alongside whatever it is that they're learning, then naturally they'll start to build that into the way they're problem solving, and I think that's a really key thing. If we can get it as part of curriculum for whatever courses, not just in construction, but it's a way of thinking. It's really like a way of life, really, for many of us. But I think also in construction, we really need to just make this the norm, and to make it the norm, we need some of the big players that are in a position to do so, to lead by example. And once we have more, and this links to data and being able to properly record things. Once we actually have some good case studies under our belt to say, have you seen this project? This is what we did. We partnered or collaborated with these manufacturers, or whatever. Then it becomes more normal, and you open up certain avenues that were maybe more difficult to go down before, and it just makes things easier. I think the easier we make this process of thinking circular, then the more people that will take it up. But I do think there's a big piece to be done in education. And you know, I've had quite a few engineering students over the years come to me because they've had a sustainability module to deliver or something, and they weren't sure what to write about it. You know, if we can build in circular economy into some of their, I don't know how we go about this, but into some of their curriculum and their agendas, then that would be brilliant. That would start getting it on the agenda nice and early. So for me, I think that would be a really key thing. And it does tie in then with some of the softer things that we expect of construction. So, you know, as part of many Section 106 agreements, you'll be expected to train up your own staff, but also your supply chain, and offer opportunities for local people to learn as well. So there's no reason why we can't build in circular economy training or awareness training alongside other offerings that we provide, such as safety briefings and other things, to capture some of those smaller suppliers on site.
Great, thank you. So another area I wanted to pick up on a little bit was collaboration. So whenever you read anything about circular economy, collaboration always comes out as one of the top things. You need to collaborate across the value chain. Sometimes we're good at that in the building industry, sometimes we're not. How do we think we could collaborate better and involve, you know, from an early stage, some of the more innovative things, or get the supply chain a bit more sort of engaged, really, because they're, you know, they're often sort of said, oh, well, we've never given a chance to talk to the client, or we just, you know, they're too far removed to actually sort of make a difference, or that's what some say. Joaquin, would you want to make suggest
sure.
how you collaborate a bit more and what we can learn from that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we've touched based on some of this earlier. I think government standards will help, definitely, because that's the rules of the game. So being able to play in the same, or to be moving in the same path will definitely help to share standards, share information. And then, as I said, from our side, I think a bit of transparency on the supply chain will help. But you know, something funny I like from the Park 2020 in Amsterdam, the whole project is that I mean, I remember from memory that the developer, because he wanted to deliver that such an aspirational project, the developer promised to give away the double of the profit that they were meant to be taken, in exchange of transparency in all of the costs of the products and all the actions that needed to be taken. I think that's a clear example of how much we need to sort of collaborate with one another and let us know what it is exactly and what is truly what we're buying or what we're defining to put in one project particularly, because otherwise we're taking decisions based on the wrongful information. So yeah, I think that's maybe one of the issues, I guess.
Okay, Lily, do you want to come in there? Collaboration?
Yeah, I think from a principal contractor perspective, the earlier that we can engage with our client, the better, because the earlier we can engage with our client and the earlier on in design as well, because, you know, we have design teams and we have a good offering internally as well. The earlier that we can engage, then the earlier we can talk to our suppliers as well, and maybe hand pick suppliers, if we've got the time, hand pick the suppliers that perhaps can meet some of these other criteria that we want to start looking at, and maybe that are willing for trialing or piloting things that are new to the industry. But often we find that we're engaged later on in the design phase, so we have very little, you know, we can't offer our suggestions from our own learning and our own knowledge, and then we might have quite a short time frame then to engage with our own suppliers base. So for me, it's about the earlier we can engage with and collaborate with our client, the better, because then we can do the same with our supply chain.
Yeah, and I can see David nodding there, and I'm sure David's also got a role in that as being a consultant on projects and bringing, you know, acting as that sort of person who can bring different parties together in some respects. Do you want to comment there?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's really interesting actually when you do present new ideas and new things to project teams is they're all really interested. It's a really interesting subject, I think, for a designer. It's a really exciting subject as well as for as being a challenge for contractors as well to address this. And I think to pick up on Joaquin's point around Part 2020, that's that's the final case study in my book, because I think it really does show that completely different mindset from the traditional process of doing the design and everything, and then somewhere right down the end of the process we start to make decisions around who the supply chain is actually going to provide to do stuff. It's several layers down, isn't it? And actually I think what he did was turned it on its head and say, look, we actually want to engage with the whole supply chain at the start of the project before we've even started, and also encourage innovation in that process as well. Because it gave them a bit of space to innovate rather than driving down to the cheapest. He said, right, I thought the other idea was really interesting, was saying that this is the budget for the facade. What's the best product you can give me for that, rather than waiting down the supply chain and saying, right, what's the cheapest thing you can give me? That's going to be... There's a great quote, isn't it, from one of the astronauts. I think it was on the first astronaut flight. I think it was in the shuttle. Yes, right. It was the first astronauts to go up in the shuttle, and they were they asked them. The press asked him, "How do you feel about going up in this?" And he said, "Well, it is a bit scary that I'm going up in something that was the lowest cost tendered shuttle that could have been constructed." I would rather it was the other way around. We should have gone for the highest bidder in this case.
And we are seeing, I think we are seeing slowly but surely much more move towards sort of procurement for value, aren't we? And there's more sort of procure for value frameworks coming out, value in the whole sphere. So whether that be social or environmental or people and natural. So I think it is moving there. We could, but
there is in theory, but in practice, I think in theory there is, but in practice, there's always a capital cost budget to hit. And it's usually every project I've worked on, the budget is smaller than the actual latest cost estimate for the job. There's always some value engineering to be done. Yes,
unfortunately, yes. So a couple of quick questions here. So someone's asked, I don't know if this is someone you've planted in the audience, David, but they said, can you please recommend a book about circular economy? I am new in the field.
Can't think of any, no. Yes, all right, that's great, thank you for that. So Building Revolutions by David Cheshire is on sale now at Amazon and RIBA. Amazon and RIBA, and there will be a new edition out, probably end of next year by the time we get it out.
Okay, we have a question here about contractors actually, so I'll direct this one at Lily. It's about how many main contractors are looking to drive their change with their supply chain regarding data from them to measure embodied carbon. So are you seeing contractors starting to ask more for embodied carbon data, and is that driving your decision making at all yet? Sorry, I'm asking you for all contractors, so I do appreciate that.
I would say that for buildings, for example, that have some sort of environmental assessment methodology, so whether it's BREEAM, LEED, whatever, then we, as a principal contractor, are asking as standard of our supply chain to provide certain information around their material choices. So, you have to monitor your materials for BREEAM. And ideally, if you've engaged with your supplier early enough, then you have time to actually hand select materials and maybe play around with the BREEAM tools, for example, to identify the best material in terms of cost, but also carbon, for example. So I would say at the moment, it's not unusual for a principal contractor to request the supplier to provide carbon data in terms of the materials that they're supplying. And also most principal contractors will also have standard KPIs that they expect of their supply chain to deliver anyway. But I can see this is starting to change now, because obviously we're trying to understand our carbon data even more. than before, because we want to understand how we're going to reduce it. And we're also doing the same now. Obviously, next year we're going to be looking at our own KPIs for circular economy. So we're not just looking at carbon, we're looking at, you know, where did this product come from, and where's it going to go once it's finished its life. So yeah, it's a difficult one because we don't want to overdo it with data. We don't want to bog suppliers down with having to report too much in. And so if there are ways that we can now start to automate KPIs and reporting, that's going to be brilliant. I think Joaquin earlier mentioned that we need really like a standardized way to report things in the industry, so that we all understand what it is that we're reporting, and that it, you know, projects can be compared easily with each other in terms of their performance or their circularity or whatever it might be. So yeah, I would say it's not unusual at the moment for us to be reporting or requesting materials information, whatever that may be, particularly for environmental assessment methodologies, but to expect more requests in terms of the depth of detail required over the next couple of years from the supply chain, because we're all just trying to understand what it is that we're building, you know, the detail behind it. So until we understand that, I think we're going to have a bit of a push on data gathering over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And just sort of on the there's a lot of attention on, obviously, on net zero carbon, much more so on embodied carbon. Do we think embodied carbon, is there a clear enough link between embodied carbon and circularity? Will circularity is there a danger circularity could get lost a bit in terms of the embodied carbon agenda, or is it time for us to sort of embrace circularity within that, if that makes sense? Joaquin, do you want to sort of...
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think those are two concepts that are strongly linked. I mean, I don't see how we are going to be able to deliver a net zero carbon built environment in 2050 without actually putting in practice all the principles from a circular construction perspective. I mean, there's ideas out there, and there's definitely the biogenic materials that we're going to be using more and more lately, but there's a need for us to start putting in practice strategies that allow us to reuse and stop losing the value of the existing materials, which at the moment, I mean, we're talking in here in this discussion as if we were in a different reality. If we just turn our backs and look at the figures, are just astonishing, isn't it? The 60% of the waste, I think, comes from, in the UK, comes from the construction industry. So I think we need to get things, first. We need to start looking at strategies that are achievable right now, but I think they're all going to be moving towards the circular economy path, very likely.
Yeah, David, do you want to come in there at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. It's a hugely complex question, but I think I think Joaquin's right. We've got to tackle embodied carbon. I think there's a couple of risks. One is that we substitute lower embodied carbon materials in to get below a number, but actually what we do is we compromise the circularity. So the example I've always used is that I heard someone presenting many years ago in I think the water industry, saying that they'd radically reduced their embodied carbon by replacing all their metal pumps with plastic thermoset plastic pumps. And you just think, no, that doesn't sound like the right idea at all, because what you're doing is creating a thermoset plastic. You can't do anything with that at end of life apart from grind it up and try and use the particles or burn it, whereas the metal would have been recycled or hopefully had a longer life and been remanufactured. So I think we the key thing is that what's the next life, and that's always, I think, the question for circularity is what's going to happen to this next, be it building, be it element, be it product or material. But other than that, I think, yeah, there's lots of synergies between the two. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I'm I'm aware that we've got sort of 10 minutes left. Just want to give an opportunity to answer some more questions from the audience. Just as a quick one, hopefully we can answer. Are we aware of the digital supply chains in built environment group I'm not. Is anyone else aware? No, so
Not
we're
really.
not, but I'm sure we'd all like to know more. So please put that in the chat box, and we'll find out more about that. Obviously, we've talked about data, and a lot of data should happen in a digital way. So anything that can make that easier is much appreciated. We've got a question. I'm trying to find it on housing. We haven't really talked that much about housing, have we? We've probably talked more about sort of the commercial sphere. So this is looking at sort of the minimum space standards for housing. Do you think they may change or actually have to increase in order to allow flexibility for spaces? So how do we get housing to be a bit more flexible and adaptable and adapt with you for you and your family as you grow and alter, I guess? Who wants to start that? Joaquin, I'm looking at you. You're the designer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think, I mean, each project is different, of course, and it's a difficult question just to answer with a sentence. But I think there are certain strategies that we can start putting in place. One of them, I think, is that we need to start thinking about the building and the envelope as two different elements that work together, but also are independent with one another. I think what happens internally in the layout, we do have flexibility, and there are ways in which we can adapt this as we'd like, and the same as the demand that we need to provide in a residential for an open space. But I think if I had to highlight something, would be probably the relationship between that skin of the building and the interior of the building, which at the moment are, you just have a look at the window and look at the residential development, they're all one. There's no opportunity for us to adapt or adjust. I think the moment we start sort of separating these two, that will give us quite a wide range of opportunities, I guess.
Right, and that's bringing in very much the layer concept, isn't it? Which is the diagram that a lot of people know, and it's been around a long time actually. Just now starting to get sort of a lot more attention. And David, you've obviously looked at quite a lot of different sort of design strategies. I don't know if you've looked at housing or not, but particularly from sort of the commercial point of view, is there any sort of top tips there for the design world? So, you know, something that they should consider.
Well, I think it's a real dilemma. I think for housing, I think the big killer variable in terms of for adaptability, and by that I mean turning into other uses, not just housing, is floor to ceiling height, I think. And I think, you know, typically residential is the lowest floor to ceiling height because you don't need all the service voids and everything in there typically. And I think that's always going to be a problem for, certainly for flats. Houses is a bit of a different story, but for flats we're going to have, and we have got them all over the cities now, lots of, you know, buildings that we're not going to be able to adapt to any other use. But it's a real dilemma, because if we raise the floor to ceiling heights, the chances are we'll lose a floor, and therefore we'll have less accommodation. And I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that one. And we've had lots of discussions around this with lots of project teams on about adaptability versus flexibility versus longevity of use and all those other things. But then, you know, up the road for me, there's some flats that are being, you know, smashed to pieces and crushed, and that are, I think, well, probably 40 years old, and you think, crumbs, you know, could that, I mean, they're not great quality, but could they have been reused in some other form if they'd been built in a different way? So I don't have a great answer. I mean, I think what's really interesting is seeing the buildings that have survived over a long period of time, and you know that does include, you know, Georgian townhouses and other residential buildings, and lots of low-rise buildings in our suburbs, in our cities, that have been around for, you know, 100 years comfortably and have quite happily been converted into lots of different use, well, mainly staying residential, but have got huge value associated with them. So I think it's a dilemma we need to I'm not sure we're going to resolve in 3.5 minutes, I'm afraid.
No. So I wanted to take the opportunity to ask each, as we've only got 5 minutes left, just to ask each panelist, could they share one either innovative product, process or building which you think is a great example of circular economy in construction? I guess you could say, you know, a real good example or a game changer or something a little bit disruptive. So I'll pick on Lily first. Thank you.
Thanks. So this one I kind of already mentioned earlier, and it wasn't my project, so I got some of the details about this earlier in the week. But about a year ago, we had two projects running, one in London, which was an office fit out, Cat A office fit out, and another office refurb in Cambridge. And the office fit out in London, that had previously been an office that was barely used, and it had been refurbed itself only about 2 or 3 years previously. But obviously it had been redesigned for the new client, and so we were stripping out various bits, and we came across these lights, and I don't know what the original conversation was, but obviously it seemed wrong to just throw these lights away as they were in full working order, and still look good. So we went to our client over in Cambridge and talked to them about these lights and whether they were up for, you know, implementing some circular economy principles as a bit of a trial on their project, and they were up for it. So it meant that our team went to the manufacturer, the original manufacturer, and asked them, you know, would you be able to check these over and re-warranty them, because they were under a 5-year warranty and they've only been in place for about 2.5 years. So they were actually happy to do that. It was much easier than we expected. So these lights all were removed, sent over to the manufacturer. They checked them all and re-warranted them for a further 3 years, and then they went to be installed in this project in Cambridge. I mean, that was lucky because we had 2 projects going on at the same time. So, you know, it's not always that simple. But just to be able to think along those lines, you know, I think was a brilliant feat for the project team. And I think that's probably what's kick-started us now trying to implement this as a standard way of approaching our projects.
And how did that work cost-wise? Was it cheaper? Was it about the same? Was that a factor in the decision?
I actually don't know about the cost. I know it wasn't more expensive. That's all I know. I don't know how much cheaper it might have been. But I think the reason why this went ahead was because the client in Cambridge was interested in being more sustainable, and this was a great way to do that.
Great. David, do you want to give an example of something you find really interesting?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've covered loads of stuff already, but I think this idea of scenario modeling for future uses of potential uses has been a really interesting thing to do. We did it on, we just did it recently on Moorfields Eye Hospital, which is a project that AECOM's been working on, and we're trying to do it on the other hospitals that we're rolling out. And they did modeling to see whether how it would work as an office, as a residential and a hotel, and checking whether all the sort of expertise would work in terms of fire, in terms of structural loading, in terms of layout of space, and all that stuff. And it worked, and it was really interesting to do, and how you might just tweak the design a little bit. And like you were saying earlier about taking bits of the facade off to replace with plant louvers on intermediate plant floors with different louvers, different facades that could be used in glazing. So I think that was really interesting to do.
And was it difficult to do, or did you find it quite easy?
That was quite straightforward to do, and I think that was a good thing. And we were encouraging people to do that on lots of projects now, to sort of try and help them think about how, you know, because it's one thing to say, oh yeah, this building's very adaptable, but I think it's another to demonstrate how it could be adaptable, and also saying what it could and couldn't be adapted to, and where the constraints are. And if there's, you know, can be that there's no design changes, or it could be that it's just a tweak to say, you know, if we move this stairwell over 0.5 meter, then it's suddenly within range for means of escape for residential or whatever. And I think that's the sort of thing that is very interesting to do.
And Joaquin, very, very quickly, I think you have about a minute.
That's right. So yeah, one that I would actually mention is a shopping center in Madrid. It's called Ex Madrid, which, considering the challenges that the retail market are now facing, where retail is almost disappearing, they were able to reuse the existing structure of a shopping center that went bankruptcy a few years ago, back in the 90s. And by doing that, they saved so much money that they weren't really that much pushed to provide a certain amount of GLA. So they were able to provide a higher amount of leisure, and for that reason they create a destination with less money, and actually were able to overcome the challenges that the current retail market are facing. So I think I like that one precisely because it involves design, it involves finances, and it involves as well the whole materials aspect.
Brings it all together.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think our time's nearly up, so I'd like to thank all the panelists. I think I've really enjoyed this discussion. I hope the attendees have too, and I hope the panelists have. It's a shame Ruth couldn't join us, but hopefully next time. And then I guess I'd like to thank you, London Build Online. Thank you for the opportunity to give us this hour and a half to discuss circularity. So thank you. I'm not sure if they're going to come back.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Yes, we are back. So thank you to Catherine for moderating, all of our panelists, and to everyone who has joined us in the audience today. An on-demand copy of the session will be available on the website shortly after this, and all sessions are CPD accredited, so everyone in the audience will receive a CPD certificate within 1 month of today's session. If anybody has any feedback, further questions, please do drop us an email and we'll come back to you as soon as possible. And our next session of the series takes place later today at 1 p.m. and it's a panel discussion on the sustainable built environment. Thanks everyone, stay safe, and we hope to see you all at 1 p.m. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, well done everyone.